Maplewood, a small, cozy town, is known for its warm atmosphere and humble residents. The town square is a gathering place where friends meet to chat, play cards, and share stories. Harold, a 65-year-old millionaire, had moved to Maplewood after years of living in a metropolis filled with superficial people who only saw him as a symbol of wealth. Tired of the shallowness and superficial relationships, Harold adopted a new identity as Henry, a man of modest means seeking a place to settle. His secret goal was to infiltrate a group of friends who would accept him for who he truly was, not for what he owned. He rented a small house on the outskirts of Maplewood and began exploring the town, trying to understand how to approach the right people. One day, while walking through the square, Henry noticed a group of friends in a local bar called the Maple Leaf. The group was composed of simple people, but there was something about them that captured his attention. The genuine camaraderie, the sincere laughter, and the way they cared for each other. Fascinated, Henry decided that these would be the friends he was looking for. Determined to get closer to the group, Henry entered the Maple Leaf bar that same night. The bar was small, with rustic decor and a warm atmosphere. Music played softly in the background as the bartender wiped glasses with a worn cloth. Henry approached the counter and ordered a beer, keeping a watchful eye on the group he had decided to observe more closely. Jake, the informal leader of the group, was a 30-year-old man, rugged with an unshaven beard and an easy smile. He worked at a mechanic's shop and, despite his modest finances, was the backbone of his friends. Next to Jake were his two best friends, Sam, a skilled carpenter of 28, and Lisa, a 26-year-old waitress at the town's only fine dining restaurant. They were animatedly discussing a community project they were trying to fund, the renovation of the local playground, which was in dire need of repair. Seeing an opportunity to get closer, Henry, still under his false identity, offered to pay for the table's drinks. Surprised, Jake and his friends thanked him but politely declined, explaining that they preferred to maintain financial independence, even in moments of leisure. Henry, admiring the attitude, insisted, but it was only when he mentioned his desire to integrate into the community that Jake finally accepted, seeing a potential new friendship. With the drinks served, Henry began to engage in the conversation, initially in a discreet manner, listening more than talking. He soon discovered that while these friends had little in terms of material possessions, they possessed a wealth of shared experiences, common values, and unwavering mutual support. Henry found himself increasingly drawn to the simplicity of their lives and the bond that united them. Jake, noticing that Henry seemed genuinely interested, started talking about the community project that motivated him so much. He explained that the idea to renovate the playground came when he realized the town's children had no safe place to play. He and his friends had started saving money and seeking donations but were far from reaching the necessary amount. As Jake spoke, Henry felt a mix of admiration and sadness. He, who had enough money to fund the entire project with ease, knew he couldn't reveal his true identity without ruining the purpose of his quest for true friendships. Instead, he offered to help in any way he could, promising to invest his time and skills in the project. Jake, who had until then seen Henry only as a new acquaintance, began to consider him a potential friend. He accepted Henry's offer and invited him to join the group on a visit to the playground over the weekend, where they planned to start some minor repairs with the little money they had already raised. Thus, the old millionaire, now living as Henry, began building his friendship with the group. Every step he took led him deeper into the simple but rich lives of the friends from Maplewood. He felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years, even though he knew that at any moment, his secret could be discovered, ruining everything he was beginning to cherish. This newly formed friendship with Jake, Sam, and Lisa brought new meaning to Henry's life, but also placed him in a delicate position. He knew that to maintain this true connection, he would have to continue living his life for a while longer, at least until he was sure that his new friends would accept him, no matter his true identity. As Harold, still living under the guise of Henry, became more involved with the group, memories of his past began to surface. Working alongside Jake, Sam, and Lisa, he often found himself lost in thought, reflecting on the choices that led him to this small town. One afternoon, as he helped Jake repair an old seesaw, a vivid memory from his youth struck him. He was young, ambitious, and full of dreams back then. He had a close-knit group of friends who supported him long before wealth became a part of his life. They were friends who knew him for who he truly was, who shared his dreams and fears. But as Harold climbed the ladder of success, those friendships had faded. The demands of his business, the allure of wealth, and the endless pursuit of more had consumed him. He had lost touch with those who mattered most. The flashback lingered in his mind, and a wave of regret washed over him. He realized that in his quest for success, he had sacrificed the very thing he now sought in Maplewood: genuine connection. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. He had spent a lifetime building walls of wealth, only to find himself tearing them down, brick by brick, in search of something real. Harold's internal dialogue became a constant companion. He questioned his motives, his fears, and the lies he had built his new life on. Will they still accept me when they know the truth? The question gnawed at him. He had grown to care deeply for these people, not just as acquaintances, but as friends. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen, not as Harold the millionaire, but as Henry, a man who simply wanted to belong. During their work, the group's conversations often delved into their personal lives. Lisa, usually cheerful and optimistic, opened up about her struggles as a single mother. She spoke of the long hours she worked at the restaurant, trying to provide for her young daughter while still finding time to contribute to the community. There was a vulnerability in her voice that touched Harold deeply. He admired her strength and resilience, qualities that money couldn't buy. Jake, too, shared more of himself. Despite his easygoing nature, he carried the weight of the town's expectations on his shoulders. As the unofficial leader, he felt responsible for making Maplewood a better place, often sacrificing his own needs to help others. His dream of building a community center was more than just a project. It was his way of giving back to the town that had given him so much. Sam, the quietest of the group, revealed his frustrations with the limitations of small-town life. A talented carpenter, he longed to create more than just functional furniture. He dreamed of crafting pieces that were works of art, but the lack of opportunities and resources in Maplewood held him back. His words resonated with Harold, who understood all too well the feeling of being trapped by circumstances beyond one's control. As the group worked and shared their lives, Harold's bond with them grew stronger. He found himself drawn to Jake in particular. Jake's straightforward honesty and unwavering dedication reminded Harold of the person he used to be before success changed him. Jake often offered Harold life advice, unaware of the irony that he was counseling a man who had lived through more than he could imagine. One evening, after a long day of work, the group sat around a small bonfire near the playground. The night was cool, and the stars above provided a gentle light. As they relaxed, Jake began to speak about the challenges he faced. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough," Jake confessed, staring into the fire. "There's so much more I want to do for this town, but it feels like there's never enough time or money. I don't want to let anyone down." Harold listened, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he had the means to solve many of the problems Jake worried about. But he remained silent, knowing that revealing his true identity would change everything. He wanted to be there for Jake, but not as a benefactor. He wanted to be a friend. Lisa placed a comforting hand on Jake's shoulder. "You're doing more than enough, Jake. Look at what we've accomplished already. The playground is just the beginning." Sam nodded in agreement. "We're a team. We'll figure it out together, just like we always do." Harold couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. The deeper he became involved with the group, the more he struggled with the lie he was living. These people had welcomed him into their lives, shared their hopes and fears, and trusted him. And yet, He was hiding a part of himself that could shatter the very foundation of their friendship. As the days turned into weeks, the dynamics within the group began to shift. Harold's presence had become a fixture in their lives, and the relationships between them grew more complex. He and Jake developed a particularly strong friendship built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Jake, with his natural leadership, often took Harold under his wing, offering guidance and wisdom. "Life's not about what you have, Henry," Jake said one day as they worked side by side. "It's about what you do with what you have. It's about the people you surround yourself with." Harold nodded, deeply moved by Jake's words. He wanted to tell Jake the truth, to explain why those words meant so much to him. But the fear of losing what they had built kept him silent. Lisa and Sam also began to open up to Harold in ways they hadn't before. Lisa, with her nurturing spirit, started to see Harold as more than just a friend. He was someone she could rely on, someone who understood her struggles. Sam, with his quiet determination, began to share his creative ideas with Harold, seeking his opinion and advice. Harold found himself caught in a web of emotions. The guilt of his deception weighed heavily on him, but the joy of these newfound relationships was something he couldn't bear to lose. He knew he was walking a fine line, and that eventually he would have to make a choice. But for now, he clung to the hope that these friendships would survive the truth, even if he wasn't sure how or when to reveal it. Harold's internal struggle had been simmering for weeks, but now it was reaching a boiling point. Every day he spent with Jake, Sam, and Lisa deepened his attachment to them. The more he cared, the more he feared losing them. The friendships he had forged under his assumed identity of Henry had become the most meaningful relationships in his life. Yet, the weight of his deception pressed on him like an ever-tightening vice. Harold often found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations in his mind. He knew that the longer he kept up the charade, the harder it would be to reveal the truth. But the thought of telling them who he really was terrified him. Would they feel betrayed? Would they see him as a liar, someone who had manipulated their trust? The possibility of losing them haunted him. As the days passed, Harold's internal conflict began to manifest in subtle ways. He became more reserved, less talkative during their work on the playground. Jake noticed the change in his friend but didn't press the issue. However, the tension was palpable, a silent undercurrent that ran beneath their interactions. The group's focus remained on completing the playground renovation, but an unexpected financial setback threatened to derail their progress. A local business that had pledged a significant donation backed out at the last minute, citing economic difficulties. Without that money, the group wouldn't be able to finish the project. The playground they had poured their hearts into would remain incomplete, a symbol of unfulfilled promises. The news hit Jake hard. He had invested so much of himself into the project, and now it seemed like all their efforts would be in vain. The group gathered in the half-finished playground, the atmosphere heavy with disappointment. Harold watched as Jake, usually so optimistic and determined, slumped against the trunk of an old oak tree, his face etched with frustration. "This was supposed to be for the kids," Jake muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We promised them a place to play, and now we can't deliver. How can we let them down like this?" Lisa and Sam tried to offer words of encouragement, but it was clear they were struggling to stay positive themselves. Harold stood off to the side, feeling helpless. He wanted to do something, anything, to make things right, but he was trapped by his own lie. He couldn't just swoop in with his wealth and fix everything, not without revealing who he really was. As they disbanded for the evening, Harold's mind raced. The playground had become more than just a project. It was a symbol of the bond they had created. Letting it fall apart would feel like letting their friendships crumble as well. Harold knew he couldn't allow that to happen, but the solution that presented itself was fraught with risk. The next morning, Harold made a decision. He couldn't sit back and watch the group's hard work go to waste. With a resolve he hadn't felt in years, he made an anonymous donation to the playground fund. It was enough to cover the shortfall and ensure the project could be completed. He hoped that by keeping his identity hidden, he could help without disrupting the delicate balance of trust he had with his friends. When the news of the donation reached the group, the mood shifted dramatically. Jake, Lisa, and Sam were elated. The playground was back on track, and their spirits lifted with the knowledge that their dream could still become a reality. But Jake, ever the pragmatic thinker, couldn't shake a sense of unease about the situation. An anonymous donation? Jake questioned as they gathered to discuss the unexpected windfall. That's a lot of money to come out of nowhere. Doesn't it seem a little odd to you guys? Sam shrugged. Maybe someone in the town who wanted to help out, but didn't want the attention? Lisa nodded, trying to ease Jake's concerns. Yeah, Jake, it's a good thing, right? We should be grateful. But Jake's instincts told him there was more to the story. The amount donated wasn't just generous. It was substantial, far beyond what anyone in their small town could reasonably give without raising eyebrows. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that something wasn't adding up. Over the next few days, Jake quietly started asking around, trying to find out if anyone knew where the money had come from. He didn't want to seem ungrateful, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. His inquiries led nowhere at first, and he began to wonder if he was being paranoid. But then, a chance conversation with the bank manager, someone Jake had known for years, set off alarm bells. Funny thing about that donation, the manager had said offhandedly, came from an account in the city, but the name on it didn't match anyone I know around here. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He thanked the manager and left the bank, his mind racing. An account from the city? Who in their town would have connections like that? The answer came to him almost immediately, and it made his blood run cold. Henry. The realization hit Jake like a freight train. Henry, the friend he had come to trust, the man who had been there through thick and thin, wasn't who he claimed to be. Jake felt a mix of emotions. Betrayal, anger, confusion. How could Henry do this to them? How could he lie so convincingly? That evening, Jake confronted Harold in the playground, now nearly complete thanks to the mysterious donation. Harold saw the look in Jake's eyes and knew, without a word being spoken, that the truth was out. Jake, I can explain, Harold started, but Jake cut him off. Who are you, Henry? Or should I say, Harold? Do you know what it feels like to trust someone, only to find out they've been lying to your face? Harold's heart sank. The moment he had feared was here, and it was worse than he had imagined. He could see the hurt in Jake's eyes, the sense of betrayal. Everything he had worked to build with these friends was crumbling before him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The day after Jake's discovery, the group gathered at the playground, unaware of the storm about to unfold. Harold arrived, feeling the weight of what was to come. He had considered not showing up, but running away from the situation was something the old Harold might have done. He had decided to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful they might be. As Harold approached, Jake stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The other members of the group, Lisa, Sam, and a few others who had joined them over time, watched curiously. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable sense of something unspoken hanging in the air. Henry, Jake began, his voice steady but edged with emotion. Or should I say, Harold, I think it's time you told everyone the truth. Harold froze, the words he had rehearsed countless times evaporating from his mind. He looked around at the faces of the people who had become so dear to him, and his heart ached with the knowledge that he had hurt them. This was it, the moment of reckoning. Jake, Harold started, his voice heavy with regret. You're right, I haven't been honest with any of you. My real name is Harold. Harold Thompson. A murmur of surprise spread through the group. Lisa looked confused, Sam furrowed his brow, and the others exchanged bewildered glances. Jake, however, remained focused, his eyes never leaving Harold's. "Why did you lie to us?" Jake asked, his voice now tinged with hurt. "What were we to you? Some kind of social experiment? A way to feel better about yourself?" Harold winced at the accusation, the words cutting deeper than he had expected. He had anticipated anger, but the sadness in Jake's voice was almost unbearable. "No," Harold replied, shaking his head. "It was never like that. When I first came to Maplewood, I was lonely, tired of people who only cared about my money. I wanted something real, something I hadn't had in years, true friendships. But instead of being honest," Lisa interjected, her voice trembling, "you pretended to be someone else. How can we trust anything you've said or done?" Harold turned to her, his eyes pleading. "I know I've broken your trust, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I need you to understand that what I found here was more important to me than anything I've ever owned. You're right, I lied, and that was wrong. But the feelings I have for each of you, the friendships we've built, those are real." Sam, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "So all this time, you had the money to fix everything, to make things easier for us, and you just watched us struggle?" Harold nodded slowly, the guilt weighing heavily on him. "I thought that if I revealed who I was, it would change everything. That you'd see me differently, treat me differently. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you wouldn't want me around anymore." Jake let out a long breath, the tension in his shoulders visibly easing, but the hurt remained. "We would have accepted you, Harold. We did accept you. But now, how can we know what's real and what's not?" Harold's heart sank. He had feared this moment, but facing it was even harder than he had imagined. He felt a deep sadness, realizing that his actions might have destroyed the very thing he had sought to protect. But he also knew that this was the moment to be completely honest, to show them who he really was, flaws and all. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Harold said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. If that means stepping back, I will. But if there's even a small chance that you can find it in your hearts to give me a second chance, I'll do everything I can to prove that I'm worthy of your friendship." There was a long silence as the group absorbed his words. The tension was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Understanding, perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. Days passed after Harold's confession, and the group didn't see much of him. He had given them space, knowing that they needed time to process everything. Harold himself spent those days reflecting, grappling with the fear that he had lost the friendships he had come to value more than anything. Meanwhile, Jake, Lisa, and Sam met several times, discussing what had happened and how they felt about it. The initial shock and anger had begun to fade, replaced by a more nuanced understanding of Harold's motivations. They couldn't deny that he had lied, but they also couldn't ignore the genuine connections they had built over the past months. Eventually, it was Lisa who suggested that they talk to Harold again, to hear him out fully. "I think he's sincere," she said softly, "and we've all made mistakes. Maybe we should give him a chance to make things right." Jake, who had been the most hurt by Harold's deception, finally nodded in agreement. "I still feel betrayed, but if he's willing to work to earn our trust back, maybe we should let him try." The group reached out to Harold, asking him to meet at the playground. When he arrived, he saw them standing together, a united front, and felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Harold," Jake began, "we've talked it over, and we're willing to give you a second chance. But this time it has to be different. No more lies, no more hiding. We need you to be honest with us, and we'll be honest with you." Harold's relief was palpable. "I promise, no more lies. I'll be as open as I can be. Thank you for giving me another chance." The tension began to ease as they discussed how to move forward. The playground project, which had been paused during the upheaval, resumed with renewed energy. Harold, true to his word, involved himself fully, contributing his skills and time without relying on his wealth. He was determined to earn back their trust through his actions, not his money. In time, the playground was completed, and the group celebrated their achievement together. The children of Maplewood now had a place to play, and the community felt the impact of their hard work. For Harold, it was a moment of profound satisfaction, not because of the money he had donated, but because of the friendships he had managed to preserve. As they stood together, looking at the finished playground, Jake turned to Harold and offered him a genuine smile. "You know, Harold, we don't care about your money. What matters is that you're here with us, as a friend. And that's worth more than anything else." Harold felt a warmth in his chest, the kind that came from knowing he was truly accepted. "Thank you, Jake. I've learned that there are some things money can't buy. Real friendship is one of them." The story closed on a hopeful note, with Harold finally finding the sense of belonging he had longed for. The group's trust had been tested, but in the end, it was stronger than ever. They had learned that true friendships could weather even the most unexpected challenges, and that sometimes the most valuable things in life come from the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us keep bringing you more stories like this one.